In the late summer of 1944, a young woman named Lisa Lotte arrived in the United States as a prisoner of war. She was 22, a clerk from Munich, conscripted to support the German military effort. Her uniform was faded, unadorned with rank, she carried no weapons, and had never fired a shot. Yet she was still treated as the enemy. From the moment of her capture, warnings had been relentless. They told her Americans were cruel, full of hatred, and would strip away whatever dignity remained. They said she would be mocked, starved, perhaps even beaten. She was warned not to trust smiles, that every gesture of kindness might conceal deception. But when the army truck pulled up to a dusty ranch outside Abilene, Texas, what she saw was not barbed wire or stern guards, but open sky, endless fields, and horses standing quietly in the sun. By the gate leaned a man in a worn straw hat and denim shirt, arms crossed, looking at her without judgment. That moment marked the beginning of something Lisa Lotte never anticipated. In a land she had been taught to despise, she discovered language, warmth, and a kind of freedom unknown to her. And in the heart of cowboy country, she would come to love the land, its people, and a man whose life seemed as far removed from hers as desert from ocean. This is the story of how war tried to harden her, and how a quiet corner of Texas softened her instead. Arrival at Camp Darnell. The first cracks in propaganda. When Lisa Lotte stepped off the truck onto Texas soil, her boots sank slightly into the red dust. The air carried the scent of cattle, mesquite, and heat. She was led into Camp Darnell by two soldiers who spoke little, not from cruelty, but habit. The gate clicked softly behind her, far gentler than expected. Inside, the camp astonished her. No cages, no chains. The barracks were wooden, long, simple, with clean windows and white curtains. Each building had running water, working fans, and bunk beds with mattresses. Outside, clotheslines fluttered with freshly washed uniforms. The air was quiet, not with fear, but with routine, like a school or farm, not a prison. During registration, she received a small canvas bag containing 2 extra sets of work clothes, a towel, toothbrush, and soap. A nurse checked her vitals and asked in accented German if she had any injuries. Lisa Lotte shook her head, still uncertain what to make of it all. She was assigned to Barracks 6, Bunk 23, next to a girl from Hamburg who had been in camp for nearly 2 months. That girl, sunburned and sporting hand-mended sleeves, welcomed her with a dry smile, whispering, "It's not what they told us, is it?" That evening, after a dinner of beans, cornbread, and sweet tea, things she had never tasted before, Lisa Lotte attended orientation with the other new arrivals. A captain read aloud from a paper, "You are here under the Geneva Convention. You will not be harmed. You will not be starved. You will work 6 days a week on local ranches or maintenance crews. Your pay will be held in an account and may be spent in the camp store. Leaving the grounds without escort is prohibited. Attempted escape will result in confinement. Contact with civilians or guards is forbidden." He paused, then added something unexpected. "You may also choose to attend English lessons. Classes are in the evenings. Attendance is voluntary." Lisa Lotte blinked. Voluntary English lessons for prisoners. That night, long after lights out and the cicadas buzzing outside her window, she lay in bed, hands folded across her chest, whispering in German, "If this is the enemy, then what else did they lie about?" Culture shock 3 nights after arriving, Lisa Lotte sat in the back row of the mess hall, gripping a dull pencil, staring at the blackboard. Miss Turner, the English teacher, was not a soldier. She was a retired teacher from nearby Sweetwater, short, gray-haired, glasses sliding down her nose. She greeted them each session with the same phrase, "English is not about perfection. It's about connection." The words sounded strange, like music from a slightly broken piano. Class began with the alphabet. Hard consonants, soft vowels, American R's that twisted her tongue as the class repeated sounds. A, B, C. Miss Turner pointed to objects. Chair, table, door, window. Some German girls rolled their eyes. A few smirked. One muttered, "They want to turn us into them." Lieselot stayed silent, watching the teacher's mouth, listening to rhythm, repeating the words inside her head. Chair. Solid, like a stone warmed by the sun. After class, Miss Turner handed out short English poems. One, by Carl Sandburg, read, "The fog comes on little cat feet." Lieselot didn't fully understand, but it stirred something inside her. She whispered the words that night in her bunk, imagining fog creeping like a cat across Bavarian hills. Then she laughed quietly. A breath, a puff of disbelief. Release. No one had made her laugh in months. The next morning, Lieselot was assigned to stable duty. James Callahan was there. Silent. Steady. Looking more a part of the land than of any government. He handed her a coarse brush and nodded toward the horse. They worked in silence under the rising Texas sun. When she sneezed from the dust, he chuckled and said slowly in English, pointing at the hay, "Too much horse." It wasn't funny, yet she laughed, and for the first time he smiled. Not just with his mouth, but his eyes. That night, Lieselot raised her hand in class for the first time. "How do you say freedom?" Miss Turner wrote it on the board, underlining it twice. "That's a big word. Are you sure?" Lieselot nodded. Other girls looked at her like she had said something dangerous, but she didn't care. The cowboy, who never looked away. Lieselot didn't expect to see him again so soon. Barely her second week, she was back in the stables. The Texas morning was already heavy with heat, dust clinging to her skin. She passed the fence toward the barns when she saw James Callahan, arm buried in the side of a distressed mare. Her body froze. The animal's muscles quivered. The air smelled of hay, iron, and panic. He murmured low, hands moving inside the horse as if feeling for something delicate. Then he noticed her. He gave a short nod. "Stay back," he said calmly. She didn't understand all the words, but the tone carried clarity. Not a command, a warning. Quiet. Controlled. She stayed where she was. He returned to his work, and for a moment all she could hear was the rustle of straw and the deep, wet breath of the horse. When it was over, he stepped back, pulling his arm out slowly, covered in blood and fluid. He reached for a towel without saying a word. She expected disgust to rise in her throat, but it didn't. Something else filled her chest. Respect, maybe, or curiosity. Later that day, while she was scrubbing the metal rims of a trough behind the barn, he walked past her and set a canteen down beside her without stopping. She looked up. He didn't make eye contact, just kept walking. Shep picked up the canteen, hesitated, then drank. The water was cold. It shocked her teeth. "Donna," she called out almost instinctively. He turned halfway. "You speak English." She paused, then nodded. "Little, I learn." That made him smile. Not the kind of smile that asks for anything, but the kind that says, "Good." Then he said, "Then I guess I better learn some German." She didn't reply, but she smiled to herself for the rest of the afternoon. That evening in the bunkhouse, one of the other girls smirked and said, "Be careful, Liesel. That ranch boy is looking at you like you're not the enemy." But Lieselot didn't feel like anyone's enemy. The next morning, she was again sent to the stables. This time James waited with a saddle in hand. He gestured toward the mare, then began showing her the steps. He spoke slowly. Blanket first, then saddle, cinched tight, but not angry. His voice was low and patient. The way he touched the horse, careful but firm, was how she imagined people would handle something sacred. Lieselto followed his lead. Her hands fumbled at first. When she pulled the strap too hard, the horse startled and shifted. "Easy," James said, one hand steadying the mare. His other hand didn't touch her, but it hovered just close enough to guide. "You don't win them with force," he added. She met his eyes. He wasn't talking about horses. Not entirely. Later, while brushing down the mare, he handed her another brush and said, "Behind the ears. She likes that. Everyone does." Then he walked off without waiting for thanks. Lieselot stood alone in the stall, brushing the mare in silence. She began speaking in German, soft, meaningless things, stories about her mother's kitchen, the smell of plums in late summer, the quiet after rain, the way the fog rolled in over the hills back home. The mare didn't answer, but she flicked her ears like she was listening, like maybe James had been listening too. That night, lying in her bunk, she pulled out the wrinkled page from class, the one with the Sandberg poem. The fog comes on little cat feet. She didn't know why it made her ache. She didn't want anything from him. She didn't trust this place. Not yet. But she had looked at a man raised in a country she was told to hate, and she hadn't felt fear, not once, and that terrified her more than anything. The fence line talks. Some days it was the dust that got to her. Other days it was the silence. But the days Lisa Lauteweber spent fixing fence lines with James Callahan, those were different. The dust still clung to her eyelashes, and the silence was still thick. But it didn't feel like nothingness anymore. It felt like something trying to become a conversation. Their work began at dawn when the sun was still pink on the horizon, and the air not yet hot enough to boil sweat from your skin. The tools were simple: a hammer, a spool of wire, wooden posts cut from nearby cedar. She had never held a post driver before. By her second morning, she could drive one in straight. James was patient. He never hovered, never corrected unless she asked. He'd say, "You got it," even when her hands shook from strain, and when she failed, he made failure feel like practice, not judgment. They didn't talk much at first. He would say, "Post there," or "Careful snake hole," and she would nod. But after a few days, he began pointing to things and saying the English word, waiting for her to repeat it. "Fence," he said, tapping the weathered rail. She touched it. "Zan," she replied. "H," he scratched his chin. German sounds like someone trying to cough politely. She smiled. "Cloud," he said later, pointing upward. "Woola." "Say that again." "Wolk." He grinned. "That one's not bad." By the end of the week, they were trading words. One English, one German. Neither of them fluent, but both trying. The fence between them was no longer wooden. It was made of vowels and patience. One morning, she missed the head of the nail and slammed her thumb hard. The pain shot up her arm. She hissed through her teeth. James turned quickly. "You all right?" She tried to wave him off, but he was already at her side. He reached out to take her hand to look at it. Instinctively, she pulled back. His face changed, not angry, just cautious, as if remembering all at once the rules that sat between them like invisible barbed wire. "Sorry," he said. "I didn't mean," she shook her head. "It's okay. No blood." He gave a soft laugh, then sat down in the dirt next to her. The sun was climbing fast now, pressing against them like a hot breath. They sat under a pecan tree that offered barely enough shade for two people, drinking warm water from a shared canteen. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was comfortable like old fabric. "Do you miss home?" he asked quietly. The question caught her off guard. She looked down at her hands, still red from the post driver. "Yes," she said after a long pause. "I miss smells. Bread, coffee, soap from my mother's closet. I miss noise, church bells, even sirens." He nodded. "I miss snow," he said. She looked at him. "Texas has snow." He smiled about once every 100 years. "I remember it from Kansas before the dust storms, before the war took my brother." She didn't say anything, but her body leaned slightly toward him. Not on purpose, just a natural pull, like a plant leaning toward warmth. Later that week, while mending a broken corner of the fence, he pointed to a cluster of purple flowers growing wild in the field. "Those are blue bonnets," he said. State flower. Whole hills turn blue in the spring. Pretty, she said. You should see them on horseback. He said it casually like an afterthought, but it landed in her chest with weight. She imagined it riding over hills, nothing but wind and color around her. For a moment, she forgot about the barbed wire. That night in the bunkhouse, one of the girls from Leipzig leaned in and whispered sharply, "You think he's different because he smiles?" Lisa didn't answer. "They'll always remind you who you are," the girl continued. "Don't forget it first." But Lieselot wasn't forgetting who she was. She was remembering something else, something no one had taught her in uniform. That dignity didn't come from uniforms or rank or country. It came from how someone held your silence, whether they rushed to fill it or simply sat with it waiting. She lay awake long after lights out. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Somewhere far beyond the fences, an owl called into the dark. She whispered the words to herself in English. Fence, cloud, blue bonnet, and then in German, Zolka, Freiheit, freedom. She didn't dare say his name, but it echoed anyway. The letter that changed everything. The letter arrived in a brown envelope, smudged from its long journey across continents. It had been forwarded from a military address in Poland, rerouted through Geneva, then sent by the Red Cross to Camp Darnell. It was handed to her during lunch, just a plain envelope. No return name, but the handwriting was her mother's. Lisa Latta knew it instantly. It looked smaller than she remembered, shakier, as if her mother's hand had forgotten how to be strong. She didn't open it right away. She tucked it into her waistband and finished her food in silence. But every bite tasted like sawdust. That evening, after work and dinner and the usual roll call, she sat on the edge of her bunk and opened the envelope with fingers that trembled. There was only one sheet inside. She read it once, then again and again. By the third time, the words blurred. Her father was dead. The bomb had hit their building in Munich 3 weeks earlier. It was British, or maybe American. No one could say for sure. The neighbors had pulled his body from the rubble, but there was no funeral, just a mass grave. Her mother had written that she was safe, staying with cousins, but the house was gone, and her little brother, Jakob, was missing. The neighbors said he might have been at the corner bakery when the bombs fell. No one had seen him since. Lieselotte sat frozen. Her hands rested in her lap, the paper limp between them. Her breath came shallow as if grief had stolen the room's air. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stopped moving. The other girls didn't know what to do. Some glanced at her, then looked away. One girl from Frankfurt offered a quiet, "I'm sorry." But Lieselotte didn't answer. She walked out of the barracks, past the mess hall, past the watchtower, to the far fence line where the trees thinned. The moon was high, full, and soft. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes were calling to each other like ghosts. She stood there for a long time. She didn't know James was near until she heard him speak. "You okay?" She didn't turn. She didn't trust her voice. He stepped closer, still keeping distance. "I saw the envelope," he said gently. "From home." She nodded. Silence. He said nothing else. He didn't ask what it said. He didn't offer platitudes. Hay just stood there with her, not moving. And then slowly he reached into the pocket of his shirt and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. "I know I'm not supposed to give this to you," he said, "but I didn't know what else to do." He handed it to her and walked away. She opened it after he left. The paper was thin and the handwriting uneven, but she could make it out. "You're not alone. Not here, JC. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't even a promise. It was something rarer recognition. The kind that didn't ask for anything. The kind that simply said, 'I see you. You are not invisible.'" For the first time since arriving in America, Lieselotte let herself cry. Not for the war, not for the letter, but because someone, just one person, had treated her like a human being. Forbidden feelings and the fraternization rule. After the letter, things shifted. James didn't speak of it again, and neither did she. but something had opened between them. A fragile, invisible thread. When they passed each other in the stables or along the fence lines, they didn't need to smile. A glance was enough, a tilt of the head, a longer pause before walking away. But in a place like Camp Darnell, even glances didn't go unnoticed. By early October, the days were shorter and the shadows fell quicker across the yard. Lisa felt the change in the way the guards looked at her. One in particular, a corporal with a scar across his nose, seemed to linger longer than he should when she worked near the ranch gate. His eyes were sharp, not cruel but suspicious. One morning she overheard him mutter something to another soldier. "Too friendly with that ranch boy. Might be time to tighten the leash." That afternoon, the entire female barrack was called for inspection. Not their clothes, not their bunks, them. Called for inspection. Not their clothes, not their bunks, them. A captain read aloud the camp's fraternization policy. His voice was flat official. No prisoner of war is permitted to have unauthorized contact with civilian personnel. Any emotional or physical involvement will result in disciplinary action, including solitary confinement, revocation of privileges, or immediate transfer. The words were like cold water in the lungs. Afterward, the girls were quiet, but not kind. That night, in the laundry room, a girl named Hera cornered her. She had dark hair and a chipped tooth from a factory accident back in Leipzig. "You think he's going to save you?" Hera said, not raising her voice. "He'll be married to some American girl before you're even on the boat home." Lisa stared at her, stunned. "I've seen it before," Hera continued. "They look at you like you're special, but you're not. To them, you're a story, a souvenir, a way to feel good about being the victor." Lisa wanted to say that it wasn't like that, that James hadn't promised her anything, hadn't touched her, hadn't even asked for more than she was willing to give. But she couldn't because she wasn't sure. The next day, James didn't come to the stable, nor the day after that. When he finally reappeared, his face looked different, worn, defensive. They worked quietly, cleaning saddles side by side. He didn't say hello. After a long silence, she finally whispered, "Someone talked." He nodded once. "They're watching," he said. "I shouldn't even be here." Her throat tightened. "Did they threaten you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "Do you want me to stop?" It was the kindest question anyone had ever asked her, because it meant he was willing to carry the weight. But only if she let him. She didn't know what to say. Her eyes burned. "No," she whispered. He gave a small nod, but there was pain behind it. They finished the day in silence. No more word games, no shared glances, only space. When she returned to her barracks, she found her bunk had been searched, her book scattered, the poem from Miss Turner torn in half. There was no official punishment, but she understood the message. "You are not safe here. Not if you feel." She lay awake that night, hands clenched under her pillow. She wanted to stop feeling, to erase what had bloomed so recklessly inside her, but she couldn't. Because even though the world had drawn a line between them, with war, uniforms, and rules, his quiet had been the only thing that ever made her feel whole. And now, even the quiet was dangerous. The storm ride. The wind came first. It swept across the fields in hard, sudden bursts, bending the tall grass and sending loose hay spiraling into the sky. The sky had been clear that morning, bright and cloudless, but by noon it turned the color of bruised slate. The temperature dropped. The air felt electric. James saw it before she did. He rode up fast on a chestnut mare, his face tight with urgency. Liselotte was in the back paddock helping shovel feed when she heard the hooves. "Storm's coming," he said. "Bad one." She looked up. The horizon had gone dark. The wind tasted like rain and something metallic. He didn't wait for her to decide. "Come with me now." There was no time to argue. She dropped the shovel, followed him to the fence, and climbed up behind him in one motion. The mare took off like it knew what was at stake. They rode low across the pasture, the wind slicing sideways against their faces. Lisa Lott held on tightly, her arms wrapped around his waist, the saddle slick with sweat and dirt. Her heart raced, but not from fear. The first crack of thunder split the sky just as they reached the far barn. It wasn't a camp structure. It was the old ranch barn, half forgotten, mostly used for storage. James led the horse inside, slammed the door behind them, and leaned against it, chest heaving. Rain hammered down. Sheets of water pounded the roof like fists. The wind whistled through the cracks in the wood. The storm outside raged, full of noise, but inside it was calm. Too calm. Lisa Lott stood near the wall, soaking wet, her braid hanging like a rope down her back. James removed his hat, ran a hand through his drenched hair, then finally looked at her properly. "You shouldn't have come," he murmured. She stepped forward. "You told me to," he swallowed. "I meant, the other days before the storm." She stared at him, eyes locking onto his, and said, "I said no." He didn't move. Outside, thunder cracked again. Closer this time. The barn groaned. Inside, she stepped nearer, close enough to see the faint freckles on his nose, the worry in his gaze. "I'm tired of pretending," she whispered. His voice was rough when he replied, "We could both get in trouble." "I'm already in trouble," she said. He stared at her, then kissed her. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't desperate. It was gentle, tentative, like touching something fragile. She kissed him back, not for romance, not for excitement, but because it was the only honest thing left. When they pulled apart, no words were exchanged. No promises, no fantasies, just breathing. Two people drenched in a barn built long before the war began. Eventually, the storm passed. He saddled the horse. She climbed on behind him again. As they rode back toward the camp, she understood that what they had shared had altered everything. Not because of love, at least not yet, but because it had dared to exist in a place that branded them as enemies, and because she didn't regret a single moment. The war ended, not with a blast, but with a bulletin. May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day. The announcement came over the camp loudspeakers just after breakfast. The commanding officer's voice was formal, detached. Germany has surrendered unconditionally to the Allied forces. Hostilities in Europe have ceased. There was no cheering, no celebration. Not in the barracks where Lisa Lott stood holding her tray, frozen as the words hung heavy in the air. The girls around her reacted in quiet disbelief. Some cried, some stared straight ahead, unblinking. A few, the ones who had lost brothers, lovers, towns, just sat and said nothing. Lisa Lott set down her tray and stepped outside. The wind was warm, the sky impossibly blue, yet everything inside her felt gray. That afternoon, a new notice appeared on the wall outside the administration office. Prisoners would begin repatriation within the month. Transport back to Europe would be organized by region and language group. She had 30 days, maybe less. James didn't speak to her immediately. Not the next day, nor the one after. There was too much movement, too many lists, trucks, new guards, new regulations. But finally, on a quiet morning, he approached her while she was stacking tools by the stable wall. "You heard?" he asked. She nodded. "They're sending you back?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. "When?" "I don't know. Soon." They stood together for a long moment. Neither spoke. Too late for pretense, too soon for hope. He pulled a small object from his coat pocket and handed it to her. A black and white photograph. It was him on horseback, taken years earlier. He looked younger, lighter. On the back, in messy handwriting, he had written, "When the sky feels too big, remember Texas." She pressed the photo to her chest. "I don't know who I'll be when I go back," she said. "You'll still be you," he replied. "Only more. No promises, no wait for me. Just a long look, a quiet farewell." That night, she didn't cry. Not because she didn't feel it, but because the grief had settled into something different, something calm, like a bruise after the ache fades. She spent her final week at camp writing letters she never sent, to her mother, to Jakob if he was still alive, and one folded and hidden deep in her suitcase with no address. It simply read, "You made me less afraid of the world." Lieselot never returned to Germany. In the summer of 1948, she applied for permanent residence in the United States through the International Refugee Organization. She didn't go back to Texas. It would have been too much. Instead, she moved north to Montana, to a small town called Livingston near the Yellowstone River. Wide skies, harsh winters. She said the wind there reminded her of the plains near Abilene, only colder, more honest. She changed her name to Lily. She cut her hair short and stopped waiting. Not because she had forgotten James Callahan, but because the version of herself who had loved him, the prisoner, the girl in uniform, the one whispering English words to horses, was now a memory. She got a job at the public library, married a gentle, quiet man, a schoolteacher who never asked too many questions about the war. They had 2 sons. She told bedtime stories in German but never taught the language. It belonged to another life. She kept the photograph James had given her, creased, fading, edges curling with time. It stayed hidden in the back of her favorite book, between pages 117 and 118, a place no one would look. Lily lived a full, good life, but she never forgot that improbable time in the dust of Texas, where she learned that fear is loud, but kindness is quiet, and sometimes it arrives on horseback. In her final years, when her granddaughter asked if the stories about the camp, the cowboy, the kiss in the barn were true, she smiled gently. "Some stories," she said, "aren't meant to be believed. They're meant to be felt." She passed away in 2009 at the age of 87. Her children discovered a shoebox in her closet filled with letters, all unsigned, all unscented. One read, "They taught me to hate America, but America taught me how to be free. To hate America, but America taught me how to be free."